I didn't want a wife, especially not one chosen by a dead man. But the night I slid that ring onto Lily Carter's finger, I realized something far worse than obligation had just walked into my life. The church smelled like rain and polished wood, the kind of place people came to make promises they didn't intend to keep, and I stood there in a tailored black suit that cost more than most people's rent, staring straight ahead while the priest spoke words I barely heard. Lily stood across from me, soft curves wrapped in a simple ivory dress that didn't try to hide who she was, didn't try to impress me, and somehow that unsettled me more than if she had. She wasn't the kind of woman men like me married. No sharp angles, no practiced charm, no hunger for status. Just quiet. Still. Real in a way that didn't belong in my world. I didn't look at her when I took her hand. I noticed things anyway. The warmth of her skin. The slight tremble she didn't try to hide. The way her fingers didn't tighten around mine like she needed me to anchor her. If anything, it felt like she was letting me hold on. "Do you take?" the priest began, but his voice blurred into the background because all I could hear was Marcus. Rain hitting pavement. His voice breaking for the first time in the 10 years I'd known him. "Promise me, Lily won't be alone." I had nodded back then. No hesitation. No questions. That's what loyalty looked like where I came from. You didn't measure the cost. You paid it. So I said yes before the priest finished the sentence. I said it like a contract. Clean. Final. Meaningless. When it was her turn, there was a pause. Just a second. But I felt it. Like the room held its breath. Then she spoke. Soft. Steady. "I do." No fear in it. No desperation. That was the first thing that didn't make sense. The ring slid onto her finger. Simple gold. It looked too small for the weight it carried. I expected gratitude. Maybe relief. That's what people usually felt when they were pulled into my world. Safety disguised as a cage. But Lily didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just looked at me. Really looked. And for the first time, I met. Her eyes. They weren't fragile. They weren't impressed. They weren't anything I knew how to control. "You don't have to love me," she said quietly, low enough that no one else could hear. "Just don't lie to me." It wasn't a request. It wasn't even a warning. It was a line. And I realized, standing there with a ring on her finger and a promise I didn't believe in, that I hadn't married someone weak. I had married someone who didn't need me at all. And for a man who controlled everything, that was the most dangerous thing in the room. The reception ended without music, without laughter, just quiet footsteps echoing across marble floors as people who feared me more than they respected me offered polite congratulations and left as quickly as they could, and by the time the last car pulled away, the mansion felt too large for two people who barely knew each other. I did not speak to Lily on the drive back. 12 minutes of silence, broken only by the soft hum of the engine and the rain tapping against the windshield like it was trying to say something neither of us wanted to hear. She sat beside me, hands folded in her lap, not fidgeting, not checking her phone, not even looking out the window. Just still, like she belonged to herself in a way that did not require distraction. Most women would have filled that silence. Asked questions, tested boundaries, tried to understand the man they had just married. Lily did none of that, and somehow that unsettled me more than anything else. When we arrived, the gates opened automatically, iron sliding apart to reveal the estate that had taken years to build and seconds to feel empty. I stepped out first. Habit. Control. She followed a second later, her dress brushing lightly against the wet stone as if she had already memorized how not to make noise in a place that was not hers. Inside, the house was exactly as I had left it that morning. Perfect. Cold. Untouched by anything human. "Your room is upstairs," I said, my voice sounding distant even to me. "Second door on the left." I did not say our room. I did not need to. She nodded once. No disappointment. No reaction. Just acceptance, like she had expected nothing else from me. That should have made things easier. It did not. She took a step toward the staircase, then paused, turning slightly as if she had something to say. I waited. She looked at me, not carefully, not cautiously, just directly. "You do not have to avoid me," she said, her voice calm, steady in a way that did not match the situation. "I am not here to take anything from you." It was a simple sentence, but it landed heavier than any demand ever had. I did not respond. I could not, because for the first time in a long time, I was not sure what I had to give in the first place. She did not wait for an answer, just turned and walked upstairs, her footsteps soft against the wood, fading until the house swallowed the sound completely. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at nothing, feeling something shift in a place I had kept locked for years. This was supposed to be simple. A promise fulfilled. A responsibility managed. A life added without consequence. But as I loosened my tie and exhaled slowly, I realized something I had not expected. She was not asking for space. She was giving it. And somehow, that felt a lot more dangerous. I woke up before the sun, the way I always did, out of habit rather than necessity. The house still wrapped in that heavy silence that came with too much space and not enough life. And for a moment, I forgot she was there until I stepped into the hallway and saw the faint glow of light coming from downstairs. Lily was already awake. That alone was unexpected. Most people who entered my world either slept too much to escape it or stayed up too late trying to understand it. She did neither. I followed the light without thinking, each step quiet against the polished floor, until I reached the kitchen and stopped just short of the doorway. She stood by the counter, sleeves pushed slightly up, her hair loosely tied back, moving with a calm rhythm that did not belong in a place like this. There was no rush in her movements. No hesitation either. Just quiet intention. The smell of coffee filled the room, warm and steady, something I had not noticed in this house for a long time. She was not dressed like someone trying to impress. Simple, comfortable, real. She turned before I could step in, like she had sensed me without needing to look. "You wake up early," she said, her voice soft but clear, like she had been speaking in this house her whole life instead of just a few hours. I did not answer right away. I was watching her, trying to understand something that did not fit into any category I knew. "So do you?" I replied finally. She gave a small nod, as if that was enough explanation for both of us. No small talk, no forced politeness, just presence. There was a second cup on the counter. I noticed it before she said anything. "I did not know how you take it," she added, glancing at the mug briefly. "So it is just black." I almost told her I did not need it, that I did not need anything. But I walked in anyway, picked up the cup. It was warm, not too hot, exactly the way I preferred it. That should not have meant anything, but it did. "You do not have to do this," I said, setting the cup down without drinking yet. "This is not part of the arrangement." She looked at me then, not defensive, not offended, just steady. "I know," she said simply. No explanation, no justification. That was the second thing that did not make sense. People always wanted something. Even kindness came with a price. But she stood there like giving cost her nothing at all. I took a sip. The coffee was right. Not perfect, but close enough to make me notice. And I did not like that I noticed. "There are staff for this," I added, more out of habit than necessity. "You do not have to act like you belong here." The words came out colder than I intended. Or maybe exactly as intended. I was not sure anymore. She did not flinch, did not step back. Instead, she reached for the sink, rinsing the spoon she had used, her voice calm as she spoke. "I am not trying to belong here," she said, turning slightly toward me. "I am just not trying to feel like a guest in my own life." That stopped me, completely, because it was not defiance. It was not submission. It was something else, something balanced, something I could not control, the kind of truth that did not ask for permission to exist. I set the cup down slowly, studying her like she was a problem I had not solved yet. She did not wait for my response, did not look for approval, just continued what she was doing, as if the conversation had already ended for her. And standing there in a house I owned, in a life I controlled, I realized something that should have been impossible. She was not adjusting to my world. She was quietly reshaping it without asking. By the third day, I realized Lily had a way of existing in my house without ever asking for permission, and that bothered me more than open defiance ever could, because defiance I understood, defiance I could control, but this quiet independence moved around me like something I could not touch. I saw it in small things. The way the living room no longer felt like a showroom no one used, because she sat there in the afternoon with a book resting on her lap, not for decoration, not to impress anyone, just because she wanted to read. The way the kitchen had fresh groceries that I had not ordered, simple things, nothing extravagant, like she was building a life instead of occupying a space. And the way the staff, who usually avoided eye contact and spoke only when necessary, began to soften around her, their voices less tense, their movements less careful. She was not commanding them. She was not trying to. And somehow, that made them listen more. I watched it all without saying anything, standing at a distance like I always did, because distance was where I was strongest. Up close, things became complicated. That afternoon, I found her in the garden behind the house, the one no one used because it was too quiet, too open, too honest. She stood near the edge of the stone path, sunlight catching in her hair, her dress moving slightly in the breeze. And for a moment, she looked like she belonged there more than the house itself. "You should not be out here alone," I said, my voice cutting through the stillness before I even decided to speak. She turned, not startled, not defensive, just aware. "I am not alone," she replied, glancing around briefly, then back at me. "There are cameras everywhere." I followed her gaze instinctively, knowing she was right. Knowing I had built this place to ensure nothing happened without my knowledge. But the way she said it did not sound like fear. It sounded like observation. That difference mattered more than it should have. "That is not the point," I said, stepping closer, closing the distance just enough to feel the shift in the air between us. "You do not understand the kind of world you are in now." She studied me for a second, her expression unreadable, not challenging, not yielding, just present. "And you think staying inside will make me understand it?" she asked quietly. I did not answer immediately, because the truth was, I did not want her to understand it. I wanted her untouched by it, unaffected. But that was not how my world worked. Nothing stayed clean once it entered. "You should be careful," I said instead, the words coming out sharper than I intended, like a warning I could not soften. She nodded once, as if acknowledging something deeper than the sentence itself, then looked back at the garden, her voice softer this time. "Careful does not mean afraid." That was the third thing that did not make sense. Because fear was the one thing my world taught perfectly. Everyone learned it eventually. Everyone except her. I watched her a moment longer, trying to understand how someone could stand in the middle of everything I controlled and still feel like she belonged to herself. And for the first time, I realized the problem was not that she did not fit into my world. It was that my world might not be strong enough to change her. It started with something small, something I almost ignored, because in my world the smallest things were usually the least important. But with Lily, I was beginning to understand that the smallest things were exactly where she changed everything. I came home later than usual that night, the sky already dark, the air carrying that quiet weight that came after a long day of decisions I could not undo. And the house, for the first time in years, did not feel empty when I stepped inside. There was light in the living room. Soft, warm, not the sharp, sterile lighting I had always preferred, but something else. Something lived in. I paused at the entrance, watching without announcing myself. Lily sat on the floor, not the couch, not the chair, but the floor, her legs folded beneath her, a blanket draped loosely over her shoulders, and across from her sat one of the younger staff members, a girl who barely spoke above a whisper on most days. They were not talking. Not really. Lily was showing her something on a tablet, her voice low, patient, explaining something step by step, not correcting, not rushing, just guiding. The girl nodded slowly, her shoulders less tense than I had ever seen them, like she was not afraid of getting it wrong. That was new. In this house, people were always afraid of getting things wrong. I stepped forward then, my shoes making just enough sound to break the moment. The girl immediately stood, her posture stiffening, eyes dropping the way they always did around me. Lily did not move as quickly. She looked up, calm as ever, like I had not just shifted the entire atmosphere by walking in. "You are home," she said, simple, like it mattered. I gave a short nod, my attention still on the girl, who now stood frozen, waiting for instruction that did not come. "What is this?" I asked, my tone neutral, controlled. Lily glanced at the tablet, then back at me. "She is studying for her certification exam," she said. She asked for help. I looked at the girl again. I did not even know she was studying for anything. That was how little I paid attention to the lives happening around me. "That is not part of her job," I said, the words automatic, a reflex built from years of structure and control. Lily tilted her head slightly, not challenging, just considering. "No," she agreed softly, "but it is part of her future. That should not have mattered to me. It did not affect operations. It did not change anything that required my attention. But something about the way she said it made it feel like it should matter." The girl shifted nervously, clearly unsure if she had done something wrong. I could feel it. That tension, that fear. The kind I had built into this place without even realizing it. Lily noticed too. Of course she did. You can go, she told the girl gently, her voice steady, reassuring in a way I had never mastered. We will continue tomorrow. The girl hesitated for a second, then nodded quickly, and left, her steps hurried but lighter than before. When the room was quiet again, I looked at Lily, really looked this time, trying to understand what she was doing, not just what I was seeing. You are changing things, I said, not as an accusation, not entirely as a question. She pulled the blanket a little closer around her shoulders, her expression calm, unbothered. I am just not ignoring them, she replied. That answer stayed with me longer than it should have. Because I realized then, standing in a house I thought I controlled completely, that she was not forcing change. She was revealing what had already been missing. The next morning, I did something I had not done in years. I stayed. Not because I had nowhere to go, but because for the first time, I was not in a hurry to leave, and that alone should have warned me something was changing in a way I could not control. Lily was already in the dining room when I walked in, not sitting at the head of the table where she technically had the right to be now, but off to the side, like she had chosen her place instead of claiming it. There was food on the table, nothing elaborate, just something simple and warm, something that looked like it was meant to be eaten, not displayed. I noticed immediately that she had set 2 plates, evenly spaced, not waiting for permission, not asking if I would join. That was new. People usually waited for me to decide everything. She did not. I took my seat without saying anything, watching her as I did, trying to understand where this quiet certainty came from. She did not look up right away. She finished pouring water into a glass, then sat down across from me, her movements unhurried, like she was not performing for anyone. We ate in silence for the first few minutes, but it was not the same silence as before. It was not empty. It was steady. That difference bothered me more than I expected. You should not be doing this, I said finally, setting my fork down with more force than necessary. There are people for it. She glanced at me, then back at her plate, her voice calm. I know, she said. No explanation. No apology. I exhaled slowly, leaning back slightly in my chair, studying her. Then why? I asked. This time, she did not answer immediately. She took another bite, thoughtful, like the question mattered but did not require urgency. Then she looked at me. Direct. Honest. Because I want to eat breakfast, she said simply. That answer should have ended the conversation. It did not. Because it was not about the food. It was about choice. Something I had taken from almost everyone in this house without realizing it. I leaned forward slightly, my tone sharper now. You think this is normal? I asked. You think you can just come in here and change how things work? She held my gaze, not defensive, not aggressive, just steady. I am not changing how things work, she said quietly. I am just living in it differently. That stopped me. Again, because it was the same pattern. She was not pushing against my world. She was existing beside it. And somehow, that made it feel smaller. I looked down at the table, at the details I had never noticed before. The placement of the plates, the warmth of the food, the absence of tension in the air. It was subtle, but it was there, and it was because of her. You are making people comfortable, I said, the realization settling in slowly, heavier than I expected. That is not always a good thing. She did not argue, did not disagree, just nodded once, like she understood more than I wanted her to. Maybe, she said softly, but it is not always a bad thing either. I did not respond, because I did not have one. And as I sat there, in a house that had always operated exactly the way I designed it to, I realized something that felt unfamiliar, something I did not like not understanding. She was not asking me to change. She was showing me that I already could. I should have seen it coming. The way small changes never stay small. The way something quiet can grow until it reaches places you thought were untouchable. But I did not realize how far Lily's presence had spread until someone else said her name. It happened in the middle of a meeting, the kind that usually followed the same pattern, controlled voices, measured words, decisions made without hesitation, and I sat at the head of the table, listening more than speaking, watching. Everything the way I always did, until one of my men paused mid-sentence and hesitated. That alone was unusual. Hesitation did not belong in that room. There is something else, he added carefully, choosing his words like they might cost him something. I did not look up right away. Say it, I said, my tone flat, giving nothing away. He shifted slightly, glancing toward the others before continuing. Your wife, he said, and the room changed in a way no one acknowledged out loud. I lifted my gaze then, slow, deliberate, the way I always did when something caught my attention. What about her? I asked. My voice did not change, but the air did. She has been speaking with the staff, he continued, helping them, asking questions. I leaned back slightly in my chair, studying him now, not the words, the reaction behind them. And I prompted. He hesitated again, then said it. They are different around her. That was it. Not a complaint. Not a problem. Just a statement. But it landed heavier than it should have. Different how? I asked. He exhaled slowly. Less afraid. The words settled into the room like something fragile, something no one wanted to touch. Fear had always been part of how things worked. Not chaos. Not cruelty. Just awareness. Boundaries. Respect. But now, hearing it framed like that, I realized something I had not questioned before. Fear had been the foundation, and Lily had walked in and quietly stepped around it. I dismissed the meeting shortly after that. No explanation. No need. The conversation had already ended for me. I found her in the same place I had seen her before, the living room, sitting on the floor again, the tablet in her hands, her attention focused on something that did not involve me. She looked up when I entered, her expression calm, like she had been expecting me without needing to check the time. Did I interrupt something? She asked softly. I walked further into the room, stopping a few feet away, my gaze steady on her. You have been talking to them, I said, not a question. She nodded once. Yes. No hesitation. No attempt to hide it. Why? I asked. This time, there was a pause. Not uncertainty. Consideration. Then she set the tablet aside and met my eyes fully. Because no one else does, she said. That answer should have been simple. It was not. Because it carried something underneath it. Something I had ignored for a long time. I crossed my arms slowly, my tone sharper now, not out of anger, but because I needed control back in the conversation. You are changing the dynamic, I said. That has consequences. She held my gaze, steady as ever, her voice quiet but firm. So does ignoring people. The words landed without force. But they stayed. I exhaled slowly, looking away for a brief second, something I almost never did. Because I realized then, standing there in front of her, that this was not about control anymore. It was about something I had never accounted for. Influence without force. Power without fear. And the part that unsettled me the most was not that she had it. It was that people responded to it, including me. It happened later than I expected, not in the middle of chaos, not during one of the countless situations where control mattered most, but in a quiet moment that should have meant nothing and somehow meant everything. I came home to find the front door slightly open, just enough to break the pattern of perfection I had built into this place. And for a second, everything in me sharpened, instinct taking over before thought could catch up. I stepped inside without making a sound, my eyes scanning every detail automatically, every shadow, every shift in the air, but the house was not tense, not disturbed, just different, softer, warmer. I followed the sound before I realized I was doing it, voices drifting from the back of the house, not loud, not urgent, just steady, and when I reached the kitchen, I stopped. Lily stood near the counter again, but she was not alone this time. An older woman stood across from her, someone I recognized vaguely as one of the staff who rarely spoke unless spoken to, her posture usually tight, her movements careful, like she was always waiting for something to go wrong. But now, she was relaxed. Not completely, but enough that it was noticeable. Lily was listening to her, not interrupting, not fixing anything, just listening in a way that made the woman keep talking. That was new. People did not usually speak freely here, not without measuring every word first. I stayed where I was, unnoticed for a moment, watching something I did not understand unfold in my own house. You can take the day tomorrow, Lily was saying gently, her voice steady, like she was offering something without making it feel like permission. We will adjust the schedule. The woman hesitated, clearly unsure how to respond. I do not want to cause problems, she said quietly. Lily shook her head once, calm, certain. Taking care of your life is not a problem. That sentence settled into the room in a way that felt unfamiliar. Because in my world, everything was measured by function, efficiency, control. And yet here she was, introducing something else entirely. The woman nodded slowly, something in her expression shifting, like relief she had not expected to feel. When she turned to leave, she finally noticed me, her body stiffening instantly, her eyes dropping the way they always did around me. The moment changed. Just like that. Lily followed her gaze and turned, seeing me for the first time since I walked in. "You are back," she said, her voice unchanged, as if nothing had shifted at all. I stepped further into the room, my attention still on the space between what I had seen and what had just disappeared. "You are making decisions now," I said, my tone controlled, but there was something underneath it I could not fully contain. She did not deny it. "I am helping," she replied simply. I looked at the doorway where the woman had stood moments ago, then back at Lily. Without asking, I added. This time she paused, not because she was unsure, but because she was choosing her words. "If I asked," she said quietly, "would you have said yes?" The question caught me off guard in a way I did not show, because the answer was immediate, clear, and not something I wanted to admit. I exhaled slowly, my gaze steady on hers. "That is not the point," I said. She held my eyes, not pushing, not retreating, just present in a way that made avoidance impossible. "It is exactly the point," she said. And for the first time, I realized something I had not considered before. She was not just changing the people around me. She was changing the way I made decisions. Without asking, without forcing, without needing permission. And the part that unsettled me the most was not that she was doing it. It was that I had not stopped her. The first time I heard Marcus's name in her voice, it did not sound like grief, it sounded like truth, and that difference stayed with me longer than anything else she had said. It happened that night, long after the house had gone quiet, when the weight of the day usually settled into something manageable, something I could ignore, but I found myself walking past her room instead of going to mine, stopping just outside the door without meaning to. It was slightly open, not enough to invite, not enough to hide, and through that narrow space, I saw her sitting by the window, knees drawn close, a small box resting in her hands like it carried something fragile. She was not crying. That was the first thing I noticed. Most people connected to Marcus had cried at some point, loudly, quietly, or behind closed doors. Lily did none of that. She just sat there, looking down at whatever she held, her expression calm in a way that felt heavier than grief. I should have walked away. I did not. "You can come in," she said softly, without looking up. That alone made me pause. I had made no sound. At least, none I could detect. Still, I pushed the door open slowly and stepped inside, my gaze moving immediately to the box in her hands. "What is that?" I asked, my voice lower than usual, like the room demanded something different from me. She hesitated for a second, then opened it slightly, revealing the contents without fully offering them. Inside were small things. A watch, a folded piece of paper, a worn keychain. Nothing valuable, nothing that should matter. But I knew immediately who they belonged to. "Marcus kept things," she said quietly, her fingers brushing lightly over the edge of the box. "Not expensive things, just things that reminded him of moments." I watched her carefully, trying to understand where this was going, why she was showing me this instead of keeping it hidden like most people would. "Why do you have it?" I asked. She looked up then, meeting my eyes fully, her expression steady. "Because I was there," she said. That answer landed harder than I expected. "There where?" I pressed. She did not look away, did not hesitate. At the end, she said simply, "The room." Shifted. Subtle, but real. Because that was something no one had told me. Not in detail. Not like that. "He did not want you there," she continued softly, her voice calm, but carrying something deeper underneath. "Not because he did not trust you, but because he knew you would try to fix something that could not be fixed." I felt something tighten in my chest, something unfamiliar, something I did not have a name for yet. "And you?" I asked, my voice quieter now, less controlled. "Why did he want you there?" She looked back down at the box, her fingers resting lightly on the watch. "Because I would not try to change anything," she said. "I would just stay." Silence filled the space between us, heavier than before, because for the first time, I realized there was a part of Marcus's life I had not understood. A part he had not given to me. "What did he say?" I asked finally. The question came out before I could stop it. She closed the box slowly, her movements careful, deliberate. Then she looked at me, not with pity, not with hesitation, but with something that felt like honesty I was not ready for. "He said you would not know how to stop being who you are," she said quietly, "and that someone would have to remind you." The words settled into the room, into me, into something I had kept untouched for a long time. And standing there, looking at her, I realized something I had not expected. I was not the only one carrying Marcus's last promise. She was too. The difference was she understood it in a way I did not. That night did not leave me. Not the way most things did. Not something I could file away and move past. Because her words stayed, repeating in a way that felt unfamiliar. Like they were not just memories, but questions I had never allowed myself to ask. I did not sleep. I did not try to. Instead, I sat in my office, the city lights stretching beyond the glass in a quiet reminder that everything out there still moved the way I expected it to, controlled, predictable, mine. But inside the house, something had shifted, and for the first time, I could not ignore it. By morning, I had already made a decision, not out of impulse, but because control meant understanding, and understanding meant seeing things for myself. I found her in the garden again, the same place she seemed to return to when she wanted space that did not belong to me. She was kneeling this time, her hands brushing lightly against the soil, adjusting something small, something I would not have noticed if I had not been looking for it. She did not look up when I approached, but I knew she was aware of me. She always was. "You said you were there." I began, my voice steady, direct, because I did not know how to approach this any other way. At the end, she paused, her fingers stilling for a moment before she continued what she was doing. "Yes," she said simply. No hesitation, no discomfort, just truth. I stepped closer, closing the distance until I was standing beside her, looking down at something I did not understand. Small plants, new growth, carefully placed. "Why did he choose you?" I asked. The question had been there all night. It came out sharper than I intended, but I did not take it back. She leaned back slightly, sitting on her heels now, her gaze lifting to meet mine, calm as ever. "He did not choose me instead of you," she said. "He chose me for something different." That answer did not satisfy me. "And what is that?" I pressed. She studied me for a second, not evaluating, not judging, just seeing something I could not hide. "You carry things like they are problems to solve," she said quietly. "He knew you would not stop trying." I frowned slightly, the words settling into something I did not like. "And you?" I asked. "What do you do?" She looked back at the small plants in front of her, her voice softer now. "I stay until they do not hurt as much." The simplicity of that answer made it heavier, not lighter. Because it was not about action. It was about presence. Something I had never valued. Something I had never learned. I crouched down slightly, not fully, just enough to bring myself closer to her level, my gaze following hers to the ground. "And you think that changes anything?" I asked. She did not look at me this time. She just continued adjusting the soil, her movements slow, deliberate. "It changes people," she said. That was the moment something shifted again, not around me, but inside me, because I realized that everything I had built was designed to control outcomes, not people, and she was standing here, proving that the one thing I had never focused on was the only thing that mattered. I straightened slowly, my chest feeling tighter than it should have, my thoughts less clear than I was used to. "You are not afraid of me," I said, not as a question, but as something I needed to confirm. She finally looked up again, her expression steady, her voice quiet but certain. "No," she said. Then, after a small pause, she added, "I just do not think you are as unchangeable as you believe." And for the first time, that did not sound like a challenge. It sounded like a possibility I had never considered. The first time I saw her hesitate, it did not come from fear of me. It came from something else entirely, something quieter and far more dangerous, because it meant there was something in this world she cared about enough to pause for. It happened 2 days later, just before sunset, when the sky turned that deep gold that made everything look softer than it really was, and I found her near the front gates, standing just inside the property line, her hands loosely clasped in front of her, her attention fixed on something beyond the iron bars. I followed her gaze and saw it immediately. A small scene unfolding on the street outside. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that should have mattered. A woman struggling with grocery bags, one slipping from her grip, a child beside her tugging impatiently, the kind of ordinary moment that people in my world rarely noticed because it had no impact on anything important. But Lily noticed. Of course she did. I watched her shift her weight slightly, her body leaning forward just enough to show intention, but she did not move past the gate. That was the hesitation. Not fear. Consideration. You want to go out there? I said, my voice calm, but it cut through the quiet between us. She glanced back at me, just briefly, then returned her gaze to the street. She could use help, she said softly. It was not a question. It was an observation. I stepped closer, the gravel beneath my shoes crunching lightly, a sound that always carried more authority than it should have. This is not your responsibility, I replied. The words came automatically, shaped by years of separating what mattered from what did not. She nodded once, like she understood the logic, but it did not change anything in her expression. I know, she said. And still, she did not move. That was the part one could not ignore. Then why are you still standing here? I asked. This time, she turned fully, facing me, her eyes steady, her voice quiet but certain. Because I am deciding if I need your permission or not. The answer landed harder than I expected. Not because of defiance. There was none. It was the honesty. The way she said it without challenge, without apology, like it was simply part of how she thought. I held her gaze, something tightening in my chest again. That same unfamiliar pressure I had felt before, growing stronger now. Do you? I asked. The question came out before I could stop it. She studied me for a moment, not measuring my power, not calculating risk, just looking for something real. Then she shook her head slightly. No, she said. Simple, clear, final. And before I could respond, she turned and walked toward the gate, her steps steady, her movements unhurried, like she had already made the decision long before I asked the question. I should have stopped her. That would have been the expected response. Control, boundaries, order. But I did not move. I watched her instead, as she pushed the gate open just enough to step through, crossing a line that no one crossed without my approval. The woman on the street looked surprised when Lily approached, but Lily did not make it complicated. She just reached for the fallen bag, lifting it easily, her voice soft as she said something I could not hear from where I stood. The child stopped tugging. The woman's shoulders relaxed. It was small, insignificant by any standard I had ever used. And yet, standing there, watching her exist in a world I had built walls around, I realized something I could not ignore anymore. She was not just unaffected by my control. She was choosing when it applied. And for the first time, I did not feel like stopping her. I felt like understanding why. She came back through the gate like nothing had happened, like stepping outside the boundaries I had built was as ordinary as breathing, and that unsettled me more than if she had hesitated or apologized or even looked back to check if I was watching. But she did not. She closed the gate gently behind her, the quiet click echoing in a way that felt louder than it should have, and walked past me with the same steady pace. Her hands empty now, her expression unchanged. You crossed the line, I said, my voice low, not raised, but firm enough to stop her. She paused then, not because of fear, but because she chose to, turning slightly to face me, her eyes calm, her posture relaxed, like she had already considered this moment before it happened. Yes, she said. No explanation, no defense, just acknowledgement. I studied her, searching for something I could define, something I could respond to, but there was nothing familiar in her reaction. No tension, no anticipation, just quiet certainty. Do you understand what that means? I asked. The question carried more than the words themselves. Years of rules, of structure, of a world where lines existed for a reason. She held my gaze, her voice steady. It means I made a choice, she said. That answer should have frustrated me. It should have pushed me back into control, into correction, into restoring what had been crossed. But it did not, because it was not reckless. It was deliberate, and that difference mattered more than I wanted to admit. I took a step closer, closing the space between us, my presence filling the gap the way it always did, but she did not step back. Not even a fraction. You are not just affecting yourself, I said, my tone sharper now, not out of anger, but because I needed her to understand the weight of things she could not see. Everything here connects. Every decision has consequences. She listened, really listened, not interrupting, not dismissing. And when I finished, she nodded slightly, like she understood more than I expected. Then teach me, she said quietly. That stopped me completely, because it was not resistance. It was not defiance. It was something else, something I was not prepared for. What? I asked, the word coming out slower than usual. If there are consequences I do not see, she continued, her voice calm, her eyes steady. On mine, Then show me. Do not just expect me to be afraid of them. The words settled into the space between us, heavier than anything she had said before, because they shifted something fundamental. She was not rejecting my world. She was asking to understand it, on her terms, without fear. I looked at her, really looked this time, not as an obligation, not as a responsibility, but as something I had underestimated from the beginning. She was not trying to break my rules. She was trying to see if they were worth following. And for the first time, I realized something I had not considered before. I did not know how to explain my world without using fear as the answer. I stepped back slightly, not in retreat, but in recognition, my voice quieter now, less controlled, more honest than I was used to. You think understanding will make it easier, I said. She shook her head gently. No, she replied. I think understanding will make it real. And standing there, in a place where everything had always been defined by power and control, I felt something shift in a way I could not ignore anymore. She was not asking me to change the world for her. She was asking me to let her see it without hiding behind what I had always used to keep people at a distance. And for the first time, I was not sure I could. It did not happen all at once. There was no single moment where everything shifted and stayed that way. No clear line I could point to and say this is where I changed. Because the truth was more unsettling than that. It happened slowly, in pieces, in the quiet spaces between decisions I used to make without thinking, until one day I realized I was thinking about her before I acted, and that was something I had never done for anyone. I saw it in the smallest ways first, the way I paused before giving an order, considering not just the outcome, but the people behind it, the way I noticed things I had trained myself to ignore, the tone in someone's voice, the hesitation in their posture, the things Lily had been paying attention to all along. It was not weakness. It was awareness. And once I saw it, I could not unsee it. She did not push me toward it. She did not ask for it. She just lived it, consistently, quietly, until it became impossible to dismiss. That afternoon, I found her in the garden again, but this time I did not stand at a distance, did not observe from the edge of her world like it was something separate from mine. I walked directly toward her, stopping beside her without hesitation, my presence no longer something she had to adjust to. She glanced up, her expression the same as it had always been, calm, steady, like she had been expecting this moment without knowing when it would come. You stayed, she said softly. It was not a question. It was recognition. I looked at her, really looked, not through the lens of obligation or control or the promise I had made to Marcus, but as someone who had become something else in my life without asking for it. I did, I replied. The words felt different. Less final. More chosen. She shifted slightly, making space beside her without making it obvious. And for the first time, I lowered myself to sit next to her, not out of necessity, not out of strategy, but because I wanted to understand what she saw when she looked at the world this way. The ground was uneven, real, nothing like the controlled environment I was used to. You said you would teach me, she reminded me gently. I let out a quiet breath, my gaze moving over the small plants she had been tending, the careful way she had arranged them, the patience it required to do something that had no immediate return. I do not know how, I admitted. The honesty came easier than I expected. She did not react with surprise. She simply nodded, like she had already considered that possibility. Then start with what you do know, she said. I was quiet for a moment, thinking about that, about everything I had built, everything I understood, everything that had defined me for so long. Power, control, precision. And for the first time, I saw the gap in it. The part that had been missing. I know how to protect what matters, I said finally, my voice lower, more certain now. She turned her head slightly, watching me, not with expectation, but with quiet interest. Then start there, she said. That was it. No instructions. No pressure. Just a direction I could choose to follow or ignore. I looked at her, at the way she existed without trying to change me, without demanding anything I was not ready to give, and I realized something that should have been obvious from the beginning. She was never the obligation. She was the reason. The reason Marcus had trusted me with something more than a promise. The reason this did not feel like a transaction anymore. The reason I was still here, sitting beside her instead of walking away. I could have everything. The city, the power, the control, but none of it had ever made me stop. Until her. And for the first time, I did not see that as a loss. I saw it as the only thing I had gained that actually mattered.